Good morning, everyone. I'm WSAV digital reporter Ashley Williams, and I'm joined here this morning with Storm Team 3 meteorologists Kyle Dennis and Alysa Carsley. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. And we
Hey,
thought we'd go a little
morning.
more in depth because, on the air, even though on Coastal Sunrise in the morning, it's hit after hit after hit, but, they're kind of short.
Exactly.
So we're going to go a little more in depth.
Yeah, so this morning we're going to be talking a little bit about Hurricane Dorian. As you know, it's still a Category 5. And it's been pounding the Bahamas pretty bad right now, so we're just going to talk a little bit about, what we can expect going forward with the storm.
Yeah, so I mean, you see the storm there behind us. It's Category 5, 165 mile per hour winds. And the worst part about this right now is even though the maximum winds have come down, it's still Category 5, and it's virtually stalled over Grand Bahama
and
Island.
it's been 24 hours now that it has been over the Bahamas. And even though it's a very compact storm, they're still seeing rainfall, they're still seeing storm surge, they are still seeing catastrophic wind. That's the way it's going to stay for at least another 24 hours until the storm really starts to pick up pace. Yeah,
I mean, this is the strongest storm now on record in the northwestern Bahamas. Category 5s are obviously destructive storms. It's as strong as they get. But at least, in a typical case, they move through and they keep moving. In this one, it's just stalled out. This is a worst case scenario for the Bahamas.
Oh, I agree, and it's going to take a little bit more. Again, 24 hours until it will completely move out and they'll be able to see, the complete destruction of what it has done.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and of course people here are wanting to know, well, what does that mean next? What does the storm do next? And what does that mean for us? So we're waiting to see when the storm resumes its forward motion. If it resumes moving to the north, that would be the best case scenario for us because that would mean a farther offshore track. But if it continues to make progress to the west, that would bring the storm closer to us and our impacts would be a little more serious.
Right, we've been looking at 3 possible scenarios. One, it does get closer. We see hurricane conditions, hurricane force winds, storm surge, heavy rain, or it moves to the west and we see very low impacts. So maybe like gusty breeze, some rain, mainly right along the coast.
Yeah, and we have some graphics coming out that will show that. But I know, Ashley, you've been kind of keeping track on social media. Lots of people are asking questions. So before we go on further with more weather graphics, why don't we take a look at some of the top questions that people are asking? Maybe we can help out there.
Well, I mean, of course, a lot of people are wondering, with some places saying that they have to evacuate, mandatory evacuation. So they keep asking, do I have to evacuate? I live here. Do I have to go? And or how is it going to impact my city? So as far as that goes, what can you say is about being able to say this is how it's going to impact certain cities?
Well, as far as evacuations go, there are a couple of things there. One, all of the live announcements we are streaming on WSAV.com. We're putting them on the air as well. We also have all of that information on our website. If there is an evacuation order issued for your area, follow it. The thing right now is even though there's still a range of scenarios, the margin of error is just so tight on this storm that there's still, depending on how far close to the coast the storm tracks, the range is still everything from full-fledged hurricane conditions to almost a complete miss. There will be impacts in some variety. I think, at this point, the swell's going to be kicked up. We may have some storm surge, in either scenario. But, I think it's going to come down to the fact that right now, we can't yet rule out the worst-case scenario. If the storm hugs the coast, we're looking at a full-fledged hurricane. So because that can't yet be ruled out and we're within 48 hours, it makes sense that evacuations are being issued.
Right. I mean, it's really going to depend on where that storm tracks. If it tracks 30 miles more to the west, we see the hurricane conditions. More to the east, we see less impact. So it's going to really depend on exactly that and what they can see for their city.
Mm-hmm. Let's say just one more thing about that. If the storm tracks far to the east side of the cone right now, we would be largely spared. We wouldn't see severe amounts of rain, wind, or storm surge. In areas that evacuate, I know it's going to be frustrating if you end up evacuating and your area doesn't see a whole lot. But the thing is, once the storm picks up forward motion, again, that's, I think, when we're going to have a better idea of, where inside the cone the storm will track. But we may not know that until tonight or tomorrow morning. And then we're talking about 24 hours out until possible impact. You just can't wait that long.
So your timeline really for the storm is going to be, to see anything, will be from Wednesday into Thursday. And that's when we're going to really know. Like Kyle said, by tomorrow we will know what the possible impacts could be.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so by tomorrow and by into Wednesday and Thursday, what are you thinking if it does kind of come near the coast? What category might it be at that point? I'm sure that we will weaken by that point a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So Tim, why don't we show Max 1 right now, bring up the official track. This is as of 8 o'clock this morning. So again, still a Category 5. You see the forward motion is just about nothing right now. 165 mile per hour winds. 157 is where Category 5 begins. So even though the winds have weakened 20 miles per hour, it is still a Cat 5 and still has room to go until it even weakens further to Category 4. So the official track right now, as it reaches our latitude, late Wednesday and early Thursday, it would still potentially be a Category 3 hurricane. You know, that's a major hurricane.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is I think the storm, in terms of its physical size, will be larger. Even though it may be weaker in terms of the maximum winds, the wind field itself could be a little bit larger. And so these are the scenarios we've been watching.
We've already been seeing it start to expand a little bit. Now hurricane force winds extend 45 miles out from the center, where it was 30 miles yesterday. So we are starting to see these little changes in the storm. And, you know, looking back at that cone, where that cone is where the center of the storm could be. That doesn't show the exact impacts you could see. So again, as the storm expands, it's not going to be exactly where that center is, where we could, you know, still see major hurricane conditions. It's going to be what are the impacts outside that main center. Right,
and I think that's, you know, I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, is that so focused on that cone. And I think people think that the cone is, well, this is the area that's going to see impacts.
Exactly.
The purpose of the cone is simply to forecast where the center of the storm passes. It's only, the width of that cone is based on the average forecast error in that time frame. It has nothing to do with the spread in the models. It doesn't account for the size of the storm or the full range of impact. So you need to focus on the full details of the forecast, not just whether or not your area is in the cone.
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of people are looking right at the cone saying, oh, you know, if we get out of the cone, we're good to go. And that's not the case, because again, those impacts extend far away from that center. So I think that's something just to keep in mind over the next 24 hours, that we make it out of the cone. And, you know, that's something that could happen, but we're not out of the clear completely yet.
Right. Now, you know, where that center tracks obviously does have impact on, you know, how severe the impacts would be, because I think with this storm we've already seen and will continue to see a very sharp gradient or cutoff of the severe conditions. It may go from, you know, fairly tranquil to hurricane conditions over a very short distance. You know, hurricane winds, like Alysa said, are extending out 45 miles from the center right now. That means it only takes about, you know, a 20, 30, 40 mile shift west to see those conditions coming into our area. So if you want to break down, you know, some of the possible impacts.
So worst case scenario would be it riding up right along our coastline. That's where we get the high impact hurricane conditions right along the coastline, even tropical storm force winds farther inland, storm surge, heavy rain, again, really strong winds. 2, though, it tracks really in that middle of the cone, where we still see those conditions extending far from the center. We still see tropical storm force winds. That's 39 miles per hour for the wind gust or higher. Some rain, some storm surge, and of course the best case scenario is it tracks farther away from us with scenario 3, low impact, some rain, a gusty breeze. So that's something we will know even more within the next 24 hours.
So let's just look at, you know, the probability that we see tropical storm force wind at this point. Based on everything we know, let's zoom in a little bit here. About an 80% chance that there's at least a period of sustained tropical storm force wind along the coast. You see how quickly it drops off inland, and also how quickly it increases going offshore. This is the chance for hurricane force wind. Yeah, it's 20% along the coast. It's not particularly high, but, you know, just offshore, that ramps up quickly to 50 and 60%. So a very small adjustment in that storm track west would make the difference between us seeing a full-fledged hurricane, tropical storm force wind, and, you know, maybe almost nothing. It's just a very, very close call, and there's just no room for error in this forecast.
Right, it's really going to depend on exactly when it starts to make that turn north. The faster it turns north, the less we will see. The slower it turns north, the more we will see. So it's really going to come down to the next couple of hours and when it starts to make that turn.
And so people should definitely be still making preparations just in case. You know, we don't know what's going to happen yet. So, you know, a lot of people have been mentioning, you know, we're not sure where it's going, so, you know, they don't want to really do too much preparation. They don't want to really evacuate. So definitely want to encourage people to just be safe and make sure they have everything together just in case we do see it coming close to us.
Right. I mean, anyone who lives in a hurricane-prone area, which includes, of course, everyone along the coast and really everyone in our viewing area, by June 1st every year, you should have supplies. You should make preparations to know what you will do when a storm is approaching, because by the time we have absolute forecast certainty and the forecast is a lock and we start breaking down, okay, here's how much rain we will see, here's how much wind we will see, here's the storm surge we expect. By the time we're able to break it down to that level, there's just not enough time to make preparations. So if you're waiting for that forecast certainty, you're just waiting too long.
Yeah, we were talking about it all last week, all over the weekend, that you need to get your supplies, your hurricane plan in place now, because within the next 24 hours, you will know if you have to act on it or not. So don't wait till the last minute, because I know stores are already having water off the shelves. They don't really have it much. So you're really just lacking supplies now because you just waited. So get things now.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that, we'll come in tomorrow morning, we'll see the progress of the storm overnight, and maybe it's headed more to that east side of the cone, and it's looking like we get largely missed. That's possible. But, by tomorrow, when we can make that determination again, it's a day away.
Again, don't let your guard down, because it's possible. We still have the possibility of it becoming so much more, a bigger impact for our area. So don't let, a possibility of, we could get nothing, really determine what you're going to do, how you're going to plan as we go into the next couple of days.
Right, because a full-fledged hurricane along the coast equally can't be ruled out right now.
Yep, it's still possible.
And Alysa, you mentioned supplies. Just also wanted to mention, gas. Don't wait until the last minute to get gas, because there'll be long lines, and then stations could potentially run out. So you don't want to be left without gas if you have to evacuate. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so get gas. Also, I have a dog, so I have a plan in place for her too. So don't forget your animals. They are part of your family. So have a plan in place for your family, have a plan in place for your pet, and of course, have a plan to get your supplies and be prepared to act on them.
Yeah, my girlfriend has these 5-gallon boxes that she fills up with water. So, she has bottled water too, but you can actually, sometimes I think like the home stores, you can get those there where it's a kind of a big cardboard box with a bag inside, and you can fill those up in advance and save those. That's a good idea too.
Yeah, for our hurricane special that aired a few months ago, I did a story on how you can see if your power does go out, if your food in your freezer or refrigerator is still safe. So what you do is you freeze a cup of water, put the cup of water back in the freezer with a quarter on top. When you come back from your home or you're staying there and the power does go out, you can check to see if your food's still okay. If the power has gone out, you'll notice the quarter is slowly getting farther to the bottom because the water has melted. If it's in the middle, it's still okay, but if you're still unsure about it, throw it out. If it's at the bottom, your food's gone bad, the water has completely melted, and if it's at the top, your food is still good. So that's another big tip, just to show your food could still be okay if you do leave or the power does go out.
Yeah, actually you were saying too before, how people are kind of waiting and wanting to know, well, do I need to get the supplies, kind of waiting to see how bad it's going to be here. So let's say you got all your supplies, you make all your plans, and it turns out not to be that bad here. I mean, so what? So you have all those supplies. It's not like you need to throw them all out. There's going to be another threat at some point, and you'll already have them. So it just saves you the extra stress the next time. You already have this stuff. You won't have to go through that step again. It's just one less thing you have to do.
Because, I mean, again, we still have the possibility of this not being something. We have the possibility of it being a major impact, but there will be a next one. We're not completely, after the storm, done with hurricane season. We still have go through the peak, it's coming up, and then we still have 2 months after that to go through hurricanes and tropical storms and all that. So get stuff now, you'll need it for the rest of the season.
Here's another just little quick piece of advice too going forward. If you have your supplies, great. If you need to get some supplies, the sooner the better. But going forward, you don't necessarily have to accumulate all of the necessary supplies at once. You can pick up little things here and there, and that kind of eases the burden of having to spend all this money right away.
Which is why we recommend getting all the stuff at the start of hurricane season. That way when we're at the peak and we see more storms start to pop up in the Atlantic Ocean, you're ready. You are prepared. So
absolutely.
Great tip, Kyle.
I just wanted to go back to, at the beginning you mentioned how slowly the storm was moving right now, I guess, over the Bahamas. Is that because it's kind of over a body of land right now? Is that why it's so slow? It's like 1 mile per hour.
Initially, it was moving pretty quickly when it was in the Caribbean and as it was moving into the Southwest Atlantic, because high pressure to the north was directing it. So the clockwise flow, I guess I guess I should do that backwards, right? The clockwise flow gave it a pretty strong west wind on the south side of that high. That was pushing the storm toward the Bahamas. originally when we were thinking late Sunday, early Monday for it to reach the Florida coast, it would have arrived there when that steering current was still pretty strong, and it would have pushed it into the Gulf of Mexico. But because the storm was a little bit slower and got there later, as that westerly steering flow was weakening and that high was moving out, the steering wind just kind of shut down. And so there's nothing to move it along right now. And that's why these storms are just so much harder to predict than the ones that are connected to the steering flow, because those, if you get the steering flow right, and that's kind of like a macro prediction of the atmosphere, that's a lot easier to predict than some micro scale feature that's ultimately going to be the determining factor.
Right, and I had some comments on my Facebook page saying, oh, you know, it's over land, now it's over the Bahamas. Shouldn't it be weakening? Because at one point we were talking about it moving over Hispaniola, and it's such a mountainous terrain that it would have weakened the storm.
Right.
But the Bahamas are so flat and so small, they're not really having an impact on the storm to really weaken it. So it's stalling out, it's still Category 5. It's leaving devastating conditions in the Bahamas.
Yeah, those islands, they're small, they're much flatter, like you said. So, I mean, they've got marine air pretty much across those islands. So it's not like when you have the high terrain or a hurricane that's moving inland along the east coast where it entrains a lot of the drier continental air. So, you know, it's still in a pretty favorable environment.
They're still in prime conditions for favorable development. I mean, we still have very warm waters around the Bahamas. We have you know, still low wind shear and moist air, so it's just perfect conditions for a hurricane just to stay intact.
Right, and it's really devastating. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen some of the photos and videos coming out of the Bahamas, and earlier, just a few hours ago, they said that the first reported death was an 8-year-old child, which is really sad.
Yeah, so, it was a drowning.
So, yeah, you know, as it progresses, when we kind of try to figure out what's going to happen with this, and it gets closer to us, you know, I don't know how close it's going to get to us, but, you know, is it still going to have that potential to really be life-threatening, do you think, by the time it gets maybe near to our area?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the strength of the hurricane, just, you know, in terms of when it reaches our latitude up to this far north, it still could be a Category 3, which is considered a major hurricane, 150-mile-per-hour winds. I don't think it'll be Category 5 when it's here. But you know, a Category 3 hurricane is very, very destructive and very life-threatening. But it's just, again, it's about how far east or west, whether we actually see the Category 3 level conditions.
I was going to say, I think it really, if it's closer to us, it's still going to be a life-threatening situation, no matter if it's a Category 3 or 2, because it's going to be so much closer. We're going to see those hurricane conditions start to impact our area. Storm surge, lots of rain, gusty winds, strong gusty winds. So it's going to be just depending on how far west it moves, how far east it moves, to see any conditions or any impact.
I know some people were asking about watches and warnings. So far, there's a hurricane watch up for the Jacksonville. Let me back up a little bit here. I think I had the watch. There we go. Oh, missed it. There we go. Okay. So the hurricane watch right now goes up to Jacksonville. So the South Florida coast, Central and South Florida coast now under a hurricane warning. Hurricane watches up Daytona Beach, up through Jacksonville. No watches for us just yet, but I kind of just have that feeling at 11 o'clock we're going to probably see that update, either a tropical storm watch or a hurricane watch. Don't be surprised if you see that happen at 11 a.m.
Yeah, so tropical storm watches or hurricane watches mean it's possible. You know, it's not definite, it's not expected, it's just, it's possible. So again, we had those 3 scenarios where it could brush a little bit closer to the coast, so that's just something, in the next 24 hours we will know much more information.
Yeah.
So Alysa, earlier you touched on a little bit about the fact that the peak is coming up. Is it September 10th, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. So is it normal for around the peak to see such powerful storms like Dorian?
Yeah, I mean, last year it was kind of like the same. Last year, I remember, you know, in June, July, and early August, there were some storms, but it was a very quiet stretch, and I think everyone was kind of thinking, oh, this hurricane season is going to be, we're getting off easy this year, and then boom, everything blew up.
Same thing this year. I mean,
in September,
right at the peak of hurricane season last year, Florence. And we were tracking Florence for a while. We were in the cone, out of the cone, back in the cone. I remember it stalled out near Wilmington in North Carolina. And then in October, a month later, we had Michael, and we were tracking that through the Gulf of Mexico, through Panama City, and then sort of like the storm, it really depends on, you know, how close it got to us. Where Michael last year tracked a little bit more to the west, so we didn't see as much impacts compared to if it tracked more to the east. We will have seen a lot more impact. So again, it's kind of like this storm where it depends on where it wobbles to.
Yeah, Michael could have easily just gone a little bit further east, and we would have been right in there.
Exactly.
Same thing with this one. You know, maybe we get spared, but you know, we just can't say that right now.
Right, but we'll know more with each track that comes out, each advisory that comes out. We will know more.
Right.
Okay. Is there any other thoughts that you guys wanted to add to just, you know, going forward as far as, you know, what we can expect or what people should know?
You know, we're going to be updating the forecast constantly. We're going to be here all day. We're going to be on air. We're going to be online. We'll do these live streams, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. My handles on all my social media accounts are at Kyle Dennis WX. You are?
WSAV Alysa C.
And mine is A Renee Will. That's A-R-E-A-N-A-E-W-I-L, basically.
Yeah, and I've been doing my absolute best to get back to everyone. So if you reach out to us, we're going to do our best to answer you personally. So we'll be here for you.
All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and don't forget to check out WSAV.com/Hurricane Central to stay updated on the latest with Dorian and any other storms coming up in the next few weeks. So thank you guys for tuning in.
All right.
Bye.